Hello and welcome to the Animation Industry Podcast. My name is Terry, and lately I have been baking all different types of yeast breads. So if you have a favorite recipe, send it my way and I'll try it out. Today I made raisin twist buns, and they didn't turn out great, but they turned out pretty all right. This week I'm chatting with Carina Schulze, one of the founders of Chatrone, where she worked with Guillermo del Toro and Joge Gutierrez to produce the movie The Book of Life, as well as other projects like Bada Bean and Menino Maluquinho. Today she is here to talk about what it took to create her studio in LA and then launch another office in Brazil. She also shares what the animation market is like in Latin America and how to get back in touch with your passion when you're going through a rough patch. So without further ado, let's jump in. Hi, Carina. Thanks so much for joining me today. How's it going?
Hi, Terry. Well, thank you for having me.
Of
I'm great.
course.
How are
Great.
you?
I'm good. I'm just working I'm animating on a video game, so I'm taking a break to chat with you, and you're in Brazil, and here we are connecting halfway around the world. I don't know. I like doing this podcast. It's fun. So okay, so you're in Brazil, but you started, if we go back and where your animation career began, I know you started Chatrone in LA or Los Angeles, I guess. Did you originally start out in Brazil and then move to the States and then start the studio there and then move back to Brazil? Like, give me the scoop on how it all came to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, my career did not start in Brazil. I actually went to LA and I went to college. I went to UCLA and I really loved living in LA at the time. And I didn't immediately want to come back to Brazil. So I kept trying to extend it as much as possible. So I kept extending my visa, and then I got a job in the industry and I started working. And eventually I landed at this company called Quattro Media.
Okay.
And at the time, they were really interesting because it was a group of 4 partners, and they were one of the few production companies that were specifically focusing on animation, also comic books. So they were a management slash production company. So they represented a lot of clients, and a lot of them were also comic book creators, also visual artists, character designers. So a bunch of really, really cool people. And I thought that was such a fascinating, rich, amazing world. And I just loved all of that. And I loved going to Comic-Con, and a lot of the content that they were producing was at Comic-Con, and the clients that they represented. So at the time, they also represented IDW Comics. So a lot of
Okay.
these amazing artists, and I would always go and I'd fangirl, and I couldn't even talk to them. And they also, it was great. They also worked with Kevin Eastman,
Okay. So this
and I
wasn't like just a
couldn't.
ragtag bunch of 4 people who are just like, we like comics and stuff. This was like a pretty well established and represented company that it was only 4 people.
Yeah, it was only 4 people at the time.
And so how did you jump into that? They've got a tight-knit group going on. They're establishing themselves. And then Karina comes along. She's just like, "Hey, I'm trying to extend my visa." And they're like, "Sure, come work with us."
Literally, this is what happened because I had a visa, and my visa was connected to the job that I had. So if I didn't have a
Yeah.
job, I couldn't have a visa.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
would have to go back home. So my visa was about to expire, and I was like, okay, I need to get another job so I can extend it. And I went and I searched and I found these guys, and I went and I interviewed, and the position was to be an assistant. And, when I got the job, I was really happy because I was able to extend my visa. So that
Yeah.
was great. But I was also really fascinated by all the things that these guys had going on. And eventually, I realized, okay, I also want to be involved either as a producer or I also had ideas, and I was also writing, and I also knew that I needed to create my own content. So eventually I ended up creating a few projects, and these projects started getting a lot of attention in the industry. And what happened is that one of the partners and myself, we ended up branching out of Quattro Media and opening Chatrone. And this
Nice.
partner, his name is Aaron Berger, and he is awesome. And he's still, to this day, my partner and my best friend. And, it's been amazing. But together with Aaron, we had a couple of clients that came with us, and we started this company called Chatrone. in LA.
Gotcha.
And we specialized mostly in animation and kids, but a lot of our clients were super heavy, like heavyweight animation guys like Jorge Gutierrez, Ciro Neely, who's also incredible, a bunch of great writers, a bunch of great directors. So we were working with these guys and selling their content to studios, to networks, and also just managing their careers and also getting them jobs. And in parallel to that, Aaron and I were also creating our own content, because as a writer, I was also always, actively like writing pitches, writing scripts. So it was one of these trajectories that we kept doing both things in parallel, and it worked out for us. So to this day, we're still working with these amazing clients. So, we did Book of Life with Jorge, and, shout out to Jorge, who's amazing. I was just, hanging out with him at Annecy, and, taught me so much. And he's such a great mentor, and, such a talented guy and such a great guy. So I'm, really happy to, to still be working with him. And in parallel, Aaron and I started also like selling our own content and selling our shows. And eventually, as these things go, Brazilian, I would go and spend some time in Brazil every now and then and meeting people in Brazil. And so part of my trajectory was also ending up in Brazil, creating a show, selling a show. And when that happened, Aaron and I decided, okay, Aaron, you're going to mostly run the LA office, and I'll keep going back and forth. I'll run the Brazilian office, and he will keep coming back and forth. And to this day, that's kind of how we've been doing things.
Yeah, amazing. That's a great summary, and I love how passionate you sound. And also, from my understanding, it took about 10 years to get there to sell the first kid show in Brazil. But I'm wondering, from the start of your story, it just sounded like you partner with these guys, you're on an extended visa, and then you just branched off and started a production company, and suddenly you're working with big names, you're selling your own, like that all sounds like mad successes really, really quickly. But how did you make that happen? Because also, you're trying to build trust and a reputation in the industry when you're very, very new. And on the side, you said you had some, you were creating content that was picking up as well. So I feel like everybody in this industry is trying to do both those things, make content that is gets traction and excitement going, and work with really, really cool people. So how are you able to do both? It sounds like you sound like a unicorn right now. Maybe you are.
Well, I gave you the really, really short version, but it wasn't easy. It was a very difficult journey. And even to this day, we're still always hustling, and you have ups and downs, and you have moments where you're like, oh, we're going to have work forever. Like during the pandemic, I had so many projects going on that I was like, oh my God, I never have to pitch again. I can just chill and keep doing other seasons. And now it's like, now we have to roll up our sleeves and get back into it and start pitching again, because it didn't really, even though we've been very successful and I really love all our shows, the industry is changing. And so, things change and you have to adapt. But to answer your question, I think I was really lucky because, I have to say that I think I was able to sit on the shoulders of giants, because, it was really great being an assistant at that time, because I was able to learn a lot, and I was able to be a part of every process. So I think it would be different if, for example, if I was an animator and I would have gone to art school, and I would have my portfolio, and I would start knocking on doors, or doing my short film, and then my short film would have to, go through a festival. I think it would have been a different trajectory. So I think in many ways I got lucky, because as an assistant, I was able to participate in every aspect of the animation industry. So on the one hand, I was managing these really, really talented clients who were showrunners, directors. And so, we would visit them, we would talk to them, we'd have lunches with them, and, they would talk about what was happening in their career so we could help them. But at that point, I would be watching them, I would be learning, I would be accompanying them. So basically, Ciro Neely was on Super Robot Monkey team for JetX at the time. And I remember just like learning from him, watching him direct, watching, his designs and understanding from him, like what works, what doesn't work. Why did this episode work? And what are the changes that he had to make on this animatic to make it work? So I was learning just watching them and just being with them. And then on the other hand, like I was looking at the contracts. So I was understanding how much things cost, what the networks are paying, what they're looking for, what deals look like. So I started also understanding if I created something, how much money would I be able to make and how much would that last for me? And what was I able to do? So I kept just like learning all these things. And then on the script side, which is my area of expertise, because I'm a writer, I was just reading so many scripts from so many shows because I have access to all this stuff. And this was at a time when information on the internet wasn't as available as it is today. So for me, it was a privilege because I had all the scripts from all the shows that my clients were working on. So I was able to read, and I was able to also be on calls where networks were giving notes. And so I started to really understand, like, this works on a script. This is what the networks don't want. And then also pitches, because sometimes as managers, we would accompany our clients to pitches. And I started understanding, like, what can sell a pitch? What are the things that work? What are the things that don't work? What are the questions that they always ask? And so when I would go home at night, I'd be like, okay, careful. It has to be character driven, because it's not character driven, they're not going to buy it. And it's an animated series. So, it can't be, at the time, now things are changing, it can't be too serialized. The episodes have to be, they have to close in and of themselves, and you have to tell a complete story. And so, like, these little things, it's like going to school basically, but I was getting paid. So
amazing. Did you ever feel like, okay, so you had all this access to this information, which sounds amazing, and like, not a lot of people have access to this, and you were curating not only your pitches towards the experience that you had, where this is what studios want, this is the kind of writing, et cetera, et cetera. Did you ever feel like you were because, like, for me as a creator, sometimes I'm scared I'm getting too formulaic versus like having a unique voice. Did you ever feel like you were just creating for a formula that people wanted versus like keeping your voice in there at all?
Yes, absolutely. And I think I grapple with this to this day. And I think it's one of the reasons why, for example, Book of Life is a story that Jorge Gutierrez created, and it's very personal to him.
Yeah.
And I think because it's so personal, I watched it sort of like for different reasons. Some of them had more to do with the market or budgetary. It would get passed somewhere, but it would always resurface, and people would always ask about it. And it would, like, it's kind of like you didn't have to do much, but the project had a life of its own. And I think it's because it was such a personal, powerful story that it moved people. And I think that's how eventually, Guillermo fell in love with it, and then, it found a home and it got made. And so, like, that was interesting because sometimes you listen to what people want, or you listen to what pitches work, and there's always this little formula, and you pitch exactly within that formula and it doesn't sell. And it took me a little bit of time to understand that there has to be something personal. There has to be something that means something, that moves people. It needs to have a soul.
So what does that mean? What does that mean exactly? The soul or personal thing? Like, I think it's one thing to say that, but like, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, and I think it's hard to explain exactly what it means, but there's a feeling that you get when you're pitching someone and the project feels that it resonates. You can feel, like, from the reaction of the other person, even if they're very trained at being, very poker faced, you feel this, like, energy in the room.
Yeah.
Sometimes online it's harder to feel it, but like you feel this energy in the room. And
you can tell if people are paying attention and want more, even if they're just sitting there, because there's the difference between like dead silence crickets and like dead silence, like, I can't wait to share this next thing with you.
Yes. And it's like, it resonates, it connects with that person. It's something that's not like in your mind, it's like in your soul, that connects with that person's soul. And it usually what I think, and it's hard to always hit that, I think it has to do with something that you're talking about that's really real to you ends up being real to someone else, because as human beings, we have similar experiences, we have similar feelings and emotions. And so they connect to that. And sometimes, and you know what happens too? Sometimes you sell that and it's not the pitch that you sold, but that seed, that thing is still there. And the things around it change, but that still stays there.
Can you give an example of, like, you know, you've pitched a number of successful projects, both live action and animation. Can you give an example of that thing, that piece of soul, that thing that stays there, that connects from people with a project that you've successfully sold? Like what that thing is that you think really connects with people versus, you know, here are the characters, here's the world, because you can build that in anything.
Yeah, I think, like, I mean, maybe I can tell like the example of Gabi Estrela, which is a project that, and this is interesting because I think that going to Brazil sort of liberated me in a way, because I was living in LA and, you know, we were selling pitches, we were getting things made, we were selling clients pitches, but it's a very consolidated market and it's a very specific market, knows what it wants, has its slots, like everything's very specific. Yeah. And when I came to Brazil, and I remember I went there, it was like 2011, and I went to a market and I started understanding, like, okay, this is the Wild West right now. Like there's so much opportunity. They don't know exactly what they want. They're still figuring it out. They're passionate. They're making stuff. There's great talent, but it's basically a world of opportunity. And I think that emotionally, it was like, okay, I'm going to tell a story that I want to tell. It doesn't matter if they like it, if they don't like it, because whatever, I'm just going to do this. And if it doesn't work, I'll just go back to LA. So I wasn't scared at all. I wasn't worried. I wasn't scared. It's like my reputation, because like there's another thing that whenever you go to a meeting in LA or anywhere, I guess, but in LA, this was very strong, was that they always tell you, like, okay, when you pitch it, they may not buy that story. They may not buy, but you're selling yourself.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot.
So you have to be great and you have to be amazing, because like then they're going to work with you. They're going to hire you for someone else, because if they hate it and if they don't like you, then the next, they're not even going to answer the call.
Right. You have a shy personality. Goodbye. Like,
like goodbye. They're not even going to answer your email. So every time I went in, it was like, oh, like stakes were so high. And I was also always so terrified.
Yeah.
And then when you're terrified, you're always walking this very fine line, and you end up maybe unconsciously being a little generic in some of your ideas because you don't want to get anything wrong.
Right.
When I went to Brazil, I was like, who cares if they hate me? I could just go back to LA, whatever. And I was just like so enamored by just like the energy, and there's so much going on. And I was like, okay, so I pitched, I ended up meeting another producer, and she's a very passionate woman. Her name is Mara Lobão. And she owns this production company in Rio. And she said, Carina, like, so happy that I met you, because I can't stand it anymore, because my daughter just wants to watch Hannah Montana. And like, I need her to love something from Brazil. Like we're such a huge country, such a rich culture. Let's create something that she will listen to. She will buy, notebooks, and she'll go to school and she'll talk about something that's Brazilian. And I was like, okay, let's do it. And so that's when we created Gabi Estrela, which is the first project that we sold in Brazil. And I think it resonated because it was a story of a girl who lives in the city. She goes back to the farm where she grew up, where she was born. And her dad died when she was really young. And as she's there, she starts reconnecting to his stuff and realizes that he was this country musician, this like sort of burgeoning country musician, and finds all his music, and then ends up sort of falling in love with all that music and ends up singing. And eventually throughout the show, we had 130 episodes, because in Brazil it's like the telenovela thing, so like many episodes. But by the end of the third season, she's this famous pop star. But it all started because of this connection with her dad. And it all started because she wanted to get to know him more, and she wanted to connect with him. And it was not about being famous. It was about the music and the connection and her roots and getting in touch with stuff that she kind of had lost living in the city. And I think that that really resonated with people. And when I pitched it, she was a teenager. She would like spend like a little bit of time at the farm and then would quickly move back to the city. And, you know, it was a completely different pitch than what it ended up being. But the kernel, the truth was still there, which is about a girl who connects with the things of her dad. And I think that's what resonated with people.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. You know, you mentioned like the human connection and how we resonate between each other, and connecting to your family and history and culture. It sounds like that's what, I haven't seen it personally, but it sounds like that's what it's about, and everything is just kind of semantics on top. Okay, cool. I'm wondering, you know, maybe just a little bit more reflection on the past. It sounds like you had an amazing opportunity to soak up as much information as possible. I guess two questions. One is, what was driving you to, because you could have been in that environment and not, you know, just done the work, you know, versus turn it into some amazing opportunities, start a business, start a branch in another country, you know, bring new shows around the world, etc. So what compelled you to do that? And then the second part, I guess, is how would you recreate this scenario for you? Like, how would you get back into this if you had to start fresh? Like, if somebody's listening, they're like, you know, I would love to get into producing or writing, etc., but I don't have this amazing opportunity. You know, how would I take advantage of a situation?
Yeah, so I think for me, it was a period of my life where my parents are very ambitious, very like high achieving business owners. And so they instilled that on me. And I was always like the really, really good student, you know, worked really hard, like studied really hard, and like always trying to get A's. And if I didn't get A's, I would get really upset. And I think I took that work ethic into my career when I started. And so I became this amazing assistant. So like my bosses, like they loved me because I was like so great at like answering calls and scheduling and this and that and da, 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 da. And then when I became a manager, I was also such a great manager. I knew everything that my clients were doing, and I was like super present, and I could just like off the top of my head, like list out the points and their contracts and all of that. But after a while, I realized like if I keep doing this, I'm going to be a great manager and I'm going to be a great at that. But this is not what I want to do. This is not exactly what I love my clients, and I had a blast doing it. But what really feed, you know, the reason why I'm here, why I'm in LA doing this is because what feeds my soul is writing and creating and being part of the creative process. So I had to force myself to break away from that a little bit and separate time in the day whenever possible and at night to work on my stuff and to start branching out. Because at one point it also, you know, you're calling production companies or you're calling networks and studios to pitch clients, but then you have to make the transition to pitching yourself.
Right.
And I knew that if I waited too long, I wouldn't be able to cross that line. And so I think that it had to be, I think it was a moment where I realized I needed to do it no matter what it took. And thankfully I had a very supportive business partner who understood and who also believed in me, who supported me to be able to do that. So I think there's a lot of luck in there as well. And I think what I would have done differently and what I would love to as advice to everybody is that I think you should definitely, if possible, first get a job where you can learn from someone else and learn as much as you can and soak that up as much as possible. Whether it is if you want to have your own project or you want to be a director, maybe first work for another project, another director, or whatever it is, or an assistant like I did, whatever it is, get a job, learn as much as possible. But then at one point, don't get too caught up in that so that you don't lose sight of like your vision and your artistry and what you want to do. So that you're going to have to be brave and at one point break free from that so you can,
that makes a lot of sense,
like fly, you know, on your,
like get a position
wings.
that's kind of on the same path where you can really excel and like prove yourself, and then, you know, kind of use that experience to your advantage to take it to the next level. And I think, you know, it sounds like you had an amazing business partner as well, but I think naturally in this industry, at least from my experience, if people see you're passionate, they want to help you because, this industry, you're only in it because you like it. So nobody wakes up and they're like, I don't know, I'm gonna become an animator, I guess, and then they become an animator or a producer. It's more like people that are really passionate in this industry. Good. Okay, so let's jump forward a little bit. You launched Gabby in Brazil and a whole bunch of other projects. What is the industry like now? You said before it was kind of craving for some homegrown projects. Now you've opened up this branch of Chatrone in Brazil. What is the industry looking like from your experience now?
I think we are going through this moment of transition. I hear a lot because there's been some recent changes. We've all been hearing about it and reading about it. And I think big networks and streamers for a while, I think are going to be focusing on like high profile projects and IPs and things that are based on books or things that have like big name attachments. And I think all that is great. And I think that works. And there are opportunities there. And I think some great projects will come out of that. But as far as originals, I think we're in a period where maybe less of these originals are going to be moving forward. However, what I found interesting based on just a few of the markets that I've gone recently is that we may be going back to a model that I think worked really well before, where as a producer, you have a project, you take it under your arm, you go and you pitch it, and you find co-production scenarios with other countries. So many countries have co-production treaties. Many countries, they can use their own like incentives that they have. And then basically you're going to be, maybe instead of selling something outright to a network, you're going to be doing, pre-sales or co-productions, and then you're going to be getting your content in different territories. So on the one hand, it's more work for a producer because you have to go to more places. You need to be going to these markets. You need to be doing more creative sort of deal making instead of just going to one place and selling it and getting the budget and doing it yourself. But on the other hand, I think it also empowers us because you have the chance to get your project out there to different countries around the world. If a network isn't interested in doing a second season or another season, you could still take it and try it in different places or raise the money in different ways. So you have more power over your content. So I think that will eventually open up opportunities for us and open up opportunities for creators and writers and independent producers. So I am very positive about what's going to be happening in the future.
That's great. I'm wondering, I've also been hearing this trend as well. I'm wondering though, how do you maintain, I guess, the heart of your project when not only is there just, one big production company is involved and, they have some say, but suddenly you have multiple partners internationally who also have their incentives, their tax incentives, like, a portion of the voice acting has to be done here or animation has to be done there. Are you afraid of it, the heart of the story becoming a little bit more wishy-washy now that it has to cater to multiple cultures?
Yes, because like you have many chefs in the kitchen and many different demands, and each network has their own demands, and you have to sort of find a way to make everybody happy, but at the same time not lose sense of the heart of your story and the soul of your story. And I think that if you have a project that's very strong and has that element that we were talking about that connects with everybody, like that will always, you want to make sure that stays intact. But I think that one thing that, and I think about this a lot, actually, because I think that if you have a strong producer who will protect the showrunner, and so no matter which countries or how many people are talking or how many notes you're getting, if you have a very good showrunner who can communicate with everybody and make sure that they get people what they need, but that they maintain the integrity and the soul of the project, I think that's your best chance.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense for any industry, really, no matter what kind of product you're producing. I'm also wondering, you know, you're a writer and a producer. How do you end up juggling your love for writing and trying to create your own original content with all this production side where you're trying to, you know, make partnerships, sell, et cetera? Because it's two full-time jobs, essentially. How are you, you know, and you're building you're building a branch of a studio in another country. Like, tell me how you juggle, manage it all.
It's a really good question, and I struggle with it a lot. And I think the easy answer is I have really great partners.
Yeah.
So in the Brazilian company, I also have a partner called Rodrigo Olayo, and he is an animation producer, and he's fabulous. I think he's the best animation producer in Latin America. I really do.
Wow.
He's also my husband, but even if
Okay.
he wasn't, I really do think he's a genius. He's brilliant. So what that does is that whenever I'm producing something, he gives me very specific guardrails and a very solid structure so that I can focus on the creative and I don't have to worry about the budget, the schedule, because we have a very good team that's taking care of that. So like my day every day is making sure that the scripts are good, the animatics are good, you know, the teams are working, and I can look at things from sort of like from high above and not be so involved in every detail, because that's, I think, the secret of being a good producer. And I'm saying I'm great at it yet. I'm still working on it, but I believe that the secret is being able to look at it from an angle where you don't have to be super involved in every single detail, but you can look at it and kind of like see if the moving parts are working.
Yeah.
Like I'm a very big fan of soccer, and I watch so much soccer, of course, right? Because I'm also from Brazil, so there's soccer every day here.
Yeah.
And I watch so much soccer, so much soccer that like you look at when you're looking at a game and you're looking at it from a distance, you can kind of like see where the players are and if they're well positioned, and if you need to like change, you kind of like, you can see it like almost like a machine that's either working on or it's not. That's the goal.
Yeah.
When you're producing a project, you can look at it from above and you can see the parts that are working, the parts that are not working, and sort of fix them. And then on the projects that I'm writing, then that's a whole different side of the brain. Then you're like in the weeds and it's like every word matters, every comma matters. And then it's almost like you're fully there. And I don't think I've been able to really understand like how to do both of them at the same time really well enough. I think one will always suffer.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be the journey of my life, is trying to figure out how to be able to do both, how to get like really great teams so that your input is being absorbed by the team and you don't have to be super involved in everything. And it's like hiring people that are better than you at everything,
Right.
so that you look really good.
I think it's interesting that you still are tackling both instead of choosing one and saying, you know, I'm going to be a writer and do that full time and find somebody to like, you know, manage the business side of things that I usually take care of, or I'm going to be the best producer and master that and hire writers. Like, why do you split your brain into these two different areas? Is it a love for them, or is it a necessity? Or like, you know, imagine Carina 10 years from now where she's got everything figured out. Are you still doing both?
Yes, I am extremely passionate about both, and I'll tell you why. I think there's certain types of projects that I feel like I write really well. And then it's just endlessly fascinating just trying to like get those characters and get those scripts and making, you know, people be emotional about like the stories that they're going through. And I love that process. But there are other projects that I know that I'm not necessarily the best at writing them,
Yeah.
but I feel that I really want to see them getting made. And I feel that I am good at certain things that will help get them made. And one of them is identifying the talent that can get it made and giving them notes and sort of like help sort of guide them or help them just get there. And that to me is also endlessly fascinating. So that's why I can't like let go one for the other.
That makes a lot of sense.
Both great.
Yeah. Another question I have for you is, you know, you've mentioned throughout this chat how much other people play a part in what you're doing, and like teamwork and finding really great people to work with, and really amazing partners, and how do you connect with those really great people who are going to champion the projects and, help rise the tide for the whole project and yourself? Like, how do you find those people? How do you stay connected with them? Because, this industry is all about networking, even though everybody hates networking. So how are you how are you good at it? How do you find these people? How do you, like, even when you said you made a connection, I forget her name, Marina or something, when you were
Yeah,
reading,
Mara.
yeah, Gabby, like, how did you connect
Yeah.
so instantly over this and create this project together?
Well, I go to a lot of markets. Like I do go to every year, I go to Kids
And so
Screen
they're like, there she is again. I see her over there.
always. Like I'm always there. So I always go to Kids Screen. I always go
Yeah,
to Rio Content Market, which happens in Brazil. And so that's how I connect with all the Brazilian and some Latin American players. I always go to Annecy. Annecy is
right.
great because everyone's there. This
Yeah,
year was awesome. I had the best time. Like it was so great. So great. So much fun. And then I usually go to MIPCOM as well. And so every year I go to those or someone from the company, like sometimes like depending on what year we're going through or depending projects, budgetary reasons, maybe we don't all go, but someone from the company will go. And so either I'm connecting with people or they're connecting with people. And so we're always looking and always aware. And it's on both ends, right? It's the buyers, but also the talent.
yeah,
The buyers is kind of easier because it's like you know them and then every year you just keep reconnecting, and sometimes people will move up or some people will leave or they'll go somewhere else, but it's like kind of like the same people, and as they move up, like you'll know their role, but then they get promoted. And so you just kind of keep in touch with that network of people. It's like your family. Like every now and then you have to call them on their birthday. You have to like wish them happy Christmas. You visit them and you
yeah,
kind of like get into that rhythm. The harder part, I think, is the talent, because the talent, they're always showing up. They're always like at Annecy. I was like, oh my God, like all these really young, amazingly talented people. And I don't know, I don't like you want to meet everybody and you want to watch every short and you want to watch every movie and you want to, but it's impossible. So you just have to be a little bit on the lookout for what specifically you
yeah,
want or what
yeah.
specifically you need.
Makes sense.
But it's
So yeah, I
yeah.
mean, if you're sending yourself out into all these conferences and places where people are gathering and then looking for the things that work well with you, it makes sense. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the projects that you have going on right now? Because I'd love for you to do that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, right now we have on Netflix is a show called Menino Maluquinho, just translated as Nutty Boy. Extremely proud of that show. It's
Yeah,
based on a famous book called also Menino Maluquinho by a famous artist in Brazil called Ziraldo, who was very important to us, especially like 70s and 80s, like during the dictatorship. He represents the subversive nature of not like, not giving up on breaking rules that don't make sense and, being free and fighting, to make the world a better place and inspiring people. So he is a very important artist for us. And I think what we tried to do when we did the show was bring that spirit
hmm.
into the day, like into nowadays. So it's a different world than it was in the 80s. But a lot of the universal experience of being a kid and understanding that like your imagination has no limits and everything is possible. I think that is what we
Yeah.
wanted to bring into the episodes. And I'm curious to hear what everybody thinks when they watch it. But I think we were successful at having that subversive spirit in the show.
Is this a
And I
project
think,
that you
yeah.
was kind of near and dear to your heart? Like growing up in Brazil, did you like, I'm sure you were aware of this comic growing up, et cetera, and then scouting out this property, this IP and creating it into a pitch pack. Was this something that was is this something you wrote yourself, or is this more of the I want to bring this to light?
Yeah, so I wrote,
Yeah.
there's this other amazing writer in Brazil called Arnaldo Branco. So we sat together and we co-created the series. So I think we always say Ziraldo created Nutty Boy, but we developed the series. And yes, absolutely. This was a book that, we read in high school. This was like, and his artistic style is also kind of subversive. It's very punk rock. It's simple. The lines are like strong lines and it's fun. And so absolutely. So it was an honor to work on the show and we love it. And the thing I love most about it is that we did the whole thing during the pandemic, the whole thing
Wow.
entirely, from writer's room to the marketing of the series. We did it all online. But what was really cool is that we were able to work with people from all over Brazil.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is super cool because they brought a little bit of their own Brazil to the show. So the writers brought expressions and experiences from their childhoods, and the artists, they brought like parts of their cities and streets. And so this show is an amalgamation of everything from Brazil. So
Oh, it's amazing. So
yeah,
somebody watching this can recognize actual places if they're from that. That's amazing. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I love hearing how animation is becoming more of an international thing because, even growing up in Canada, everything was exported from the US that we watched. Like I never saw
Yes.
Toronto in a TV show when I was a kid or anything like that. So I love hearing that, people are making their own stuff from where they're from wherever they're from, and not just relying on the US anymore. That's great.
And that is so true because the same thing for us. Like we grew up in Brazil and we had like all the shows that we were watching were US shows from
Yeah,
the US or also a lot of anime, which is kind of
right.
cool because I think Brazilian animators and artists developed this art style that has like uses a lot of anime references, but has a very Brazilian spice to it. I think it's very, very interesting. But yeah, like it's so great to be able to watch these animated shows now from all over the world. And I really hope that this keeps on happening more and more because I think it's so important for kids everywhere to see
Yeah.
themselves and be inspired. And yeah.
Amazing. So, you've produced a couple of projects now. What's next? What's next for you? I know you have one coming up that sounds really cool to me.
Yeah, so the one that we're really, really excited about is Aztec Batman,
Yeah.
which I am so excited. So we did a whip at Annecy. So we had a panel and we showed, some of the art and sort of like walked people through where the show is at right now. And I'm so excited. And it was so great. Everybody, the audience, they were so supportive and they were so excited. And it was so awesome to see that happening. And for us, it gives us the energy
Yeah.
to keep like really like fighting to make the best project possible and to make a movie that everybody will love. But I think this is an interesting case study for us to talk about, which I think is something that we do at Chatrone. That is one of the skill sets that I think we do pretty well, which is this sort of international way of doing business. So Aztec Batman was born in Los Angeles, actually, with, Aaron and Jose Carlos, who is the owner of Anima Studios in Mexico. So, Jose Carlos had the original idea. He brought it to Aaron. They talked about it. They sort of like developed it a little bit. They brought it to Warner. Warner loved what they were doing and said, okay, let's move forward. And then we worked with a Mexican writer. We worked with Juan Meza Leon, who is the Mexican director. And that's how we started shaping the project. And then we brought in a consultant, a historian,
Wow.
it was awesome. And then the designs are like, no, that's not how the Aztecs looked back then. And so we kept changing the designs in order to sort of be historically accurate, which I think made it cooler and cooler and more sort of authentic and very like an individual. It's like he's Batman, but he's not like your usual Batman. He's like the Aztecan Batman with his
Yeah.
own storyline and his own, backstory and all that. So it's fascinating. And I love it. And I'm so excited. I can't wait.
Yeah, I think it's a super fresh take on Batman, which is one of those stories that keeps getting rehashed and rehashed and rehashed. It's amazing, and I love hearing about how you're working with such a big team as well. I'm wondering, personally, it seems like you're doing great. You started this career and propelled yourself forward very quickly, it sounds like, and now you're producing a lot of projects. You said there's some downtime, whatever. How do you keep yourself motivated through all of this, through all these years? Even during the pandemic, I'm sure producing an entire series was not the most ideal during the pandemic, but you know, what motivates you to keep pushing yourself and getting on to bigger and better things?
Yeah, like we have ups and downs for sure. And like like we have very difficult moments. Like when I first started the company with Aaron, literally like a few months in, we were hit with a writer strike. So yeah, so that was a tough time, but we kept going and we kept believing in our vision and believing in our dreams. And I think it sounds cheesy, but I think it really does have to do with believing in your dreams
Mm.
and thinking that like no matter what, you're going to keep going and you're going to keep doing what you love, and eventually you're going to have great times, and then you're going to have like leaner times. And you have to have this ability to also, so like, yeah, there are moments where we're going to be able to travel all over and go, to all of the markets and pitch to everybody, and then there are moments where we're going to be a little bit more like in the office. And hey, like, but the thing is, you always have to believe in your dream, and you always have to believe that what you want to do, which is tell stories,
Yeah.
is better than having a job at the bank or,
Yeah.
something, whatever it is. So it's like, you always think like, okay, even if we're struggling, even if it's a difficult time, I'm still happier doing this and, working on scripts and looking at animated characters and talking about art and working with all these wonderful people than if I were doing something else, because like we know that this is what we want to do. So I think that it has to do with that. And I think it also has to do with telling stories that are important for you, because it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. If you're just doing, and I went through a crisis last year where I was worried about the industry and I was worried about everything that was happening, because it was right at the time when the news wasn't great out there. People were getting fired, shows were getting canceled. And I was so worried. And I kind of got back into my old habit of like trying to give people exactly what they want and trying to pitch executives exactly what they're looking for. And when I would hand in a script, I sometimes even had sort of anxiety. And this is like, I don't talk about this to a lot of people, but for some reason, Terry, I'm talking about it with you. Like I developed this anxiety where I was so worried about what the notes were going to be. And I was so worried about what that executive was going to think of me. And I was always thinking like, they're going to read that script and they're going to see that I'm horrible and I'm never going to get hired again. And I literally, these thoughts were going through my mind. And I was like, my arms would kind of go numb and cold. And I was like, it was really like not a good time. And then I had a lot of like meditation and I thought about it. And I remembered like why I started doing this in the first place and how much this makes me happy, and being around these really creative people and talented people, how great this is. And then it's not about pleasing someone else. It's not about pleasing the network executive. It's not about the show having to be a hit. It's not about like what the numbers are or how many seasons they're going to order. It's about being happy in your day-to-day, writing stories that you believe in, working with artists that you admire, happy in those moments where you see an animatic and you laugh because that joke really hit the right spot. And it's about that search for those feelings and not about what the industry thinks or what everybody else thinks, because you're going to have the ups and downs and you're going to have successes and failures. But it's like, you need to believe in what you're doing and you need to love that process and you need to love what you're doing. And that helped me get through that hump. And that's what keeps me motivated now, is just remembering why we're doing this.
Amazing. Yeah, I can tell you're very confident in like, the well that you're drawing from to keep your passion. Thank you for sharing that, by the way. I think that's great. And I'm wondering, when you were feeling that anxiety and then you came back to the roots of why you're doing this, did you change the pitches that you were pitching to be more of what you wanted to see, or were you pitching the same things with just a different attitude?
I think I did revise them a
Yeah.
little bit, like trying to go back to the root of what I'm trying to say with this. What is the theme and why is this important to me? Because that's going to be important to someone else. So they did go through changes. And then I started like not worrying so much about other people's opinions,
Hmm.
and then using pitches sometimes as like a learning lesson or as an experience, or seeing the parts that they were connected, just having more fun. I think I tried to have more fun with it. And also, to be honest with you, work less hours because I was working so many hours just trying to get everything done that I realized like I was just trying to get things done.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to just get things done, you're not allowing your brain to have those creative moments and to have
100%. Yeah.
those creative sparks. And so that is also something that I started doing, is working less, even if I won't deliver as many things, or even if maybe some of the projects that I have in development are not going to be as done as fast as I want them to be. Sure, if people are, if there's a schedule and people are paying me, those are getting delivered because that's professional. But everything else, I'm trying to enjoy the process and take it a little bit slower.
Yeah, I mean, this really resonates with me because, you know, I gave up on a whole other career that I was doing fine in to pursue animation. And sometimes I get into the motions where I'm like just doing things for the sake of doing them and for work and whatever. And I have to remind myself, like, why don't I just go back into business if I don't care about what I'm doing? So like, for me, that's a big, like what you said also is a big personal motivator for me. Like I'm doing these things because I believe in them and I want to do them and I want to have fun. And if I'm not believing in it or having fun, then why am I doing this incredibly challenging and creative career? I'm wondering though, how do you scale back on hours, do things for more fun for you when you do have like a commitment to this studio that you have in Brazil? You know, like is it just changing the mentality of kind of the business model, how it works, or is it just treating yourself a little bit nicer so you can be more creative and passionate about pushing things forward?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think on the one hand, I think I was spending a lot of time on things that weren't important,
Yeah,
or that weren't really making anybody happy.
makes
So
sense.
a lot of like just busy work, and a lot of just like a lot of things that you can eliminate from your day. And then the other thing that I started doing is empowering the teams. And again, I'm really lucky because I do have a team that's great, but just empowering them. Like maybe I don't need to be in every meeting. They can do the meeting, they can read some of the drafts of the scripts, they can give notes, and just picking what are the moments and listening to them and just letting them have, yeah, because then it takes chunks of your day, and then you can focus on that script that you need to write. Or
Yeah.
even sometimes just downtime is so important, so you can see things from a different angle, and you can understand like the things that you need to be doing to get to the places that you need to get to, or that you want to get to.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I've had managers that trust the team and let us do our thing, and it almost becomes more entrepreneurial together, where we're all like coming up with ideas, trying to this is from my business past, like come up with new creative ways to propel the business forward. And I've had managers that were extremely micromanaging, and like nothing gets done, everything's in a meeting. So yeah, trusting the team and like letting things up to, you know, focus on where you excel. That makes total sense. You know, I don't want to take all your time. I have so many more questions, but is there anything, you know, that we didn't discuss that you want to share at this point?
Actually, Terry, like if I can ask you a question, because
Oh,
I'm super
sure.
curious.
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah, so Terry, if you can tell me, like, what if you remember the exact day or the moment that you decided to switch
Oh, of
careers, and how
course.
that was for you?
It was it's hard to put into words because it's an experience, an emotional experience that I had that I don't think have words. You know, I've been a creative person my whole life, always drawing, always doodling, always doing animation projects, but I never took it seriously. And anytime any like people in my life would always say, like, oh, you should do this career, you should do this professionally, you could sell these, blah, blah, blah. But I always discounted it. And fast forward, you know, I went through my own journey, and I just had a moment where like every moment in my life where somebody had said like, this is good, like you could sell this, like it all came down to like, see, I'm like sipping over my words because I don't even know how to describe it. I had like a very like pinpointed moment where I saw myself from a different perspective, like completely, without all the like preconceived notions and barriers and walls that I had built up over my years about having a non-creative career. And it was just one moment where I saw everything clearly. I saw myself as a creative person instead of a business person. And that one point, I was sitting on my couch and I was I was so overwhelmed with emotion. I just was crying, and then everything changed from then. I hired a tutor. I got accepted into animation school, started this podcast, and really just every moment, still even my day is entirely filled with animation and connecting with people and watching animation, and it's crazy. So yeah, I can very clearly remember that moment, and that moment, I feel like my whole journey of my life led to that, me understanding who I was as a person, and that I do want to tell stories, and I have stories that I feel are important, and animation is the best way that I am able to express those stories. I just understanding myself, who I was, and going forth with that. I don't even know if that answers your question. But
It
yeah,
does.
I remember that moment all the time. It's a very impactful moment in my life.
Yeah, Terry, thank you so much for sharing that. That's like super inspiring. And I think I understand like what you're saying about like having that moment where it's just like, and
Yeah.
once you have that, you can't go back anymore.
No,
It's almost
no,
like you've woken up and now there's no way. Like now you need to like keep moving forward, or else it's too painful to hide from that thing
totally,
that's
totally.
driving
I mean,
you.
I even in my business career, I spent years trying to figure out why I was pursuing so many things, and they felt good, but they didn't feel like me, I guess. And once I just understood myself and, like, what makes me tick, I can't go back. And I get just, I do get in the motions of things sometimes and do things for the sake of doing them, but which I think is fine for anything. But I can't imagine going back to a different career path now that I feel that I'm able to express myself and people pay me to do it. And I want to keep building on there. I have a lot of challenges that I know I'm going to have to come across and push myself to get bigger and better at things. But so far so good, I guess. But yeah, it's I can't. Yeah, once you find the confidence and really understand yourself, it's like nobody can say anything differently, I guess. Yeah.
Yes.
Like before, I was the one saying no to everything. And then once I said yes, it doesn't matter if other people say no now. I'm like, you don't know me. You don't
Exactly. You
know what
don't
I'm going to
care
do.
anymore.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
care anymore. So, but it's weird because now everybody else says yes to me. There are people in my life that didn't know me were always like, we've been waiting for you to do this. Like, what took you so long? So, yeah, it feels good.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thanks for asking. Yeah, I'm wondering, well, I already asked you, is there anything else that you wanted to share, maybe as we wrap up, just so I'm not taking your whole night?
I mean, I guess thank you.
Ah,
And to everybody out there, I hope you guys, keep believing in your dreams. And I know it sounds cheesy, but it really isn't. It's actually the reason
yeah,
why we're here, and it's important. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
go
I
for
mean, thank you,
it.
thank you. And I love chatting with people like yourself. I can tell how passionate you are, and you've done some incredible things so far. So I really hope, Aztec Batman spans out as your latest project, and can't wait to see what next comes from you as well. So thank you so much for coming on the chat, Carina. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a great time. I had a blast.
Thank you. And if you're listening and you want to reach out or follow Carina, you can do so by checking out Chatrone's website, and it's chatrone.com, and I'll include the link to that in the description of this video. And that's all for now. So thank you so much for listening. Okay, bye. The music for this podcast was composed by Willem Mendo and the graphics by Luhan Wang. I encourage you to look them up if you've enjoyed their work.